What's up, everybody? This is Comic Flipper from Collectors Club Comics. Welcome to the club, and with me as always is the one, the only, Buddy Nature. And today is the After School 420 special.
Today we're going to be talking about everything from the prohibition of marijuana to when they started really highlighting anti-drug stuff in comic books. And basically the role that comic books played throughout the entire process.
Yeah, and to start off, we are going to start by name dropping this cat by Harry J. Anslinger, who was director of the U.S. Federal Bureau of Narcotics from 1931 to 1962.
Now, what was special about this guy? What did he have a bug up his butt about?
Well, the main thing he didn't like was definitely, for one, was marijuana.
Did not like marijuana?
For two, was minorities.
Basically, he said that marijuana made black men think that they were equal to white men, and that black men and Mexicans would rape white women under the influence of the drug.
Right. He even went to the U.S. Congress and said, and I quote, "Marijuana is the most violence-causing drug in the history of mankind."
Now, if you've ever smoked marijuana or known someone that smoked marijuana, you know that's not true.
Right.
This, in my mind, was a ploy because he was friends with none other than a man named William Randolph Hearst. Now, if you don't know who William Randolph Hearst is, he owned a lot of timber. He had so much timber and a vested interest in paper because he was also a publisher. Newspapers, magazines, comics, the works.
Right, and one of the first controversial, I would say, ish comic book characters was Popeye. In 1929, LZ, how do you say that last name?
Seeger,
created Popeye, the spinach-eating, sailing, pipe-smoking dude. And there was a lot of things that this Anslinger cat was actually pretty sus about, because of the fact that mariners actually had sails and rope made out of hemp.
Yeah, and they were also the purveyors of marijuana from faraway places.
Right.
Yeah.
They were actually the first original pipeline of the British Empire.
Yeah, and I mean, coming from India, Hindu Kush, as we all know.
Places like New Zealand.
Oh, they would take it to New Zealand. That was where it was most noted. So Popeye would eat spinach, and what was the slang for marijuana back in the day in the jazz clubs?
It was spinach.
Yeah.
They actually made a song called the Spinach Song, which was about smoking weed. Well, at least everybody suspected.
I mean, everybody knew. Because the Spinach song contained lyrics that actually referenced marijuana. And these clubs were full of reefer smoke all the time.
So it was only, it was clear what was going on there. And actually, this is going a little bit off topic, not really, but
the mafia would run booze from Canada to America in logs. Now, they had a bunch of timber when Prohibition ended. Now, what do they do with all that timber? They make it into paper. Yeah, and what do they do with the trucks? They distribute the goods made with paper. Magazines, newspapers, and of course, comic books.
Right, and in 1937, marijuana prohibition started, and behind it was none other than Anslinger and
William Randolph Hearst. Yeah,
along with
the mafia.
The mafia.
Yeah.
Now, William Hearst, right?
Yeah, William Randolph Hearst.
And the other guy.
Anslinger.
420 episode. They were pretty much like racist.
Oh, they weren't pretty much. They were outright.
I mean, as far as we know, as far as like the prohibition of marijuana wise, like why else would you want it gone? I mean, it's either you have an angle where you're making money off of it, or you have this like depiction of who does it and what they
do on it. Yeah. So, taken from that Popeye, from early is the violence, the fighting. He ate the spinach.
Right.
And fought and won, because he was hyper violent, and they said it would make you invincible. It would make you impervious to bullets.
Exactly.
It was wild shit that they would claim.
Right.
And of course we know now it doesn't do that.
And from there we had the Independent News Distribution Company, the IND, which again allegedly was heavily mob influenced.
Yeah.
And they were the ones who were really pushing a lot of the content back then.
I mean, with all the leftover trucks from the logging that they did during
Mhm.
Prohibition, they had the means to do it, or at least start it.
And the fact that they wanted the marijuana industry to themselves,
Yeah.
they helped
They
in the
really
outlawing
helped,
and prohibition of
Again,
marijuana.
allegedly, but it makes sense. They would help keep
Yes.
it illegal,
Mhm.
so they could have all of the clandestine money.
Right.
So starting around the 50s, they started putting out these like explicit marijuana. They would depict explicit marijuana use within comic books as a bad thing. It would be like teenage dope fiends, and would show the dangers of smoking marijuana. It would show, what happens when you have a reefer party or whatever, and that spurned the CCA, the Comics Code
a
Authority.
reefer party?
A reefer party, yeah. Sorry, my old timey.
You better invite me to one of those.
Yeah, reefer party. It spurned the CCA, which is the Comics Code Authority. They didn't allow that kind of stuff, and that made very boring comics, the
Mhm.
ones where you couldn't have crime or horror in them, you couldn't have drugs, you couldn't have any of that kind of
Oh,
stuff.
because they ended up running it out of business, right? All
Yeah.
those types of
That was the
horror,
pushback
crime.
against the crime stuff that was going on.
Right.
So, what happens?
Well, the underground comic distributors like Last Gasp, Rip Off, Kitchen Sink Press, as well as others,
Yeah.
they were sold in smoke shops, head shops, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
And the fact that they were sold there, it's like you could basically read the comic book, a really cool, trippy comic book if you were into that kind of stuff,
Yeah, if you're
right?
into that kind of stuff.
And then,
Which people who would smoke weed, it catered to their mindset.
Exactly.
Going back and forth between storylines, ending in strange ways.
But at the same time, while they were selling these trippy books, comic books, they were depicting, bongs and
Actual
weed
marijuana
pipes.
use, yeah.
But the bongs and pipes, or tobacco pipes,
Tobacco
and water
pipes
were
and water pipes,
actually, not.
They were actually used for weed. Like, yeah, they were head shops,
Oh.
and they just.
So eventually they started targeting these places because, here they are saying, hey, we're selling, like we said, tobacco
Yeah.
products, but here in the comics that are sold in this shop, we're showing, explicit marijuana use out of these.
Not only marijuana, I mean, I imagine magic mushrooms, LSD, the counterculture stuff of the 60s.
Well, at least whatever you can smoke out of those devices.
Yeah, right. And that made them prime targets for narcotics agents later on because they had the explicit use of drugs in the comic books, along with the paraphernalia in the shops. Let's be real. It's weed pipes, it's weed bongs, it's weed rolling papers.
Don't be fooled, folks.
No, you can't fool the narcs. So.
The crazy thing, though, is that in 1971, actually,
Oh yeah.
Stan Lee was contacted by the federal agency of the United States.
The
of
United States
America.
government contacted him.
And he was asked to depict a story, basically, of the dangers of drug addiction in Spider-Man.
Yeah, he had a guy out of his mind on goofballs up on top of a building. I think he either jumps off or something. I haven't read it, but it's that old adage: if you take drugs, you'll jump off of a roof.
Yeah,
And
monkey
then
see, monkey do.
Monkey
type
see,
of
monkey
thing.
do. They had Harry Osborn addicted to pills because he's rich and white. And what do you do when you're rich and white? You get addicted to pills.
So from then on, actually, it went from marijuana to just full-blown drug addiction because
Yeah.
back then, weed was the big problem.
And that's
Even in the 20s though and 30s, you still had stuff like heroin and stuff
and
like that
cocaine.
going
Yeah,
on.
that was around.
But
yeah.
I think that it wasn't until there was this weird kind of mainstream media and like the whole whoever came up with the idea to start, making this a bigger thing.
Yeah.
The whole
Well,
drugs.
pharmaceuticals weren't around like they were back then.
Mhm.
They didn't have opiates like we have today.
Right.
And at that time, 71, you saw that kind of stuff happening. In the 80s, you had Quaaludes,
Exactly.
cocaine, and then crack hit.
Right.
And then it didn't stick with marijuana after that because marijuana is not as bad as those things.
Right.
Like, objectively, it's not as bad. It's not as
Well,
bad for your health.
the
It's
way-
not as bad for your mind.
the
It's
way
just not
they-
as bad for you.
The way they depicted it though was that was the gateway drug.
The
And
gateway
that,
drug, yeah.
But then you still got things like beer, cigarettes,
Yeah.
tobacco. So I mean,
And these pills aren't illegal if you get them from a doctor,
right. But
Yeah.
I like to think since then, the whole ban and the whole making marijuana look so bad,
It's
it's kind
kind
of lifted.
Yeah.
It's especially during the 90s. I'd say
The 90s is, when we saw Image Comics come out,
Mm-hmm.
they give their guys complete creative control.
And that they definitely do. That's one thing I love about Image Comics is that
From feminism to like graphic violence, they let you do everything.
I swear, if they wanted to make Heroin Man, they'd make Heroin Man.
I'm sure they will now that we've said it.
Yeah, right. But with that said, though, we think that marijuana and comic books has gotten very lenient, especially nowadays.
Oh yeah, definitely nowadays.
Now, I mean, this is a little old
A little bit,
for us, but look at this. They got a Harley Quinn #1, or actually it's a
right
Harley
there.
Quinn annual, right? Yeah, #1, and it has a marijuana scent in it.
Yeah.
Because everybody knows marijuana is not that bad.
Are you high right now?
No. You're acting weird.
For Collectors Club Comics, I'm Buddy Nature, here with Comic Flipper. Welcome to the club.
You got any water?